زندگی میں بہرحال کچھ مسائل اور مشکلات بھی آتی ہیں، لیکن آخر میں حالات ٹھیک ہو جاتے ہیں۔ اس حدیث کے الفاظ دو طرح سے روایت کیے گئے ہیں، ایک میں خیرکم دونوں ایک ہی لفظ آیا ہے، جبکہ دوسرے کے اندر ایک دفعہ خیرکم اور دوسرا خیارکم آیا ہے، خیرکم آیا ہے۔ تو ڈاکٹر صاحب نے دوسرا خیارکم اور خیرکم کو جو ہے وہ اسے جو ہے اس پینٹنگ کے اندر جو ہے وہ پینٹ کیا ہے، یہ بتلانے کی خاطر کہ ازدواجی زندگی کی ابتدا میں میاں بیوی ایک دوسرے کے مشابہ نہیں ہوتے، جیسے خیر اور خیار آپس میں ایک دوسرے کے مکمل طور پر مشابہ نہیں ہیں، جبکہ دوسرا حصہ جو کم اور کم پر مشتمل ہے، دو بار جو لکھا گیا ہے وہ مکمل طور پر ایک دوسرے سے مطابقت رکھتا ہے کہ وقت کے گزرنے کے ساتھ مکمل طور پر میاں بیوی کے درمیان جیسے وہ بتایا گیا کہ مشابہت آ جاتی ہے۔ اور آپ دیکھتے ہیں کہ یہاں پر یہ دونوں لفظ کم جو ہیں یہ زیادہ مضبوطی سے کھڑے ہیں باقی لفظوں کی نسبت، اس طرح سے کہ میم کو اگر آپ دیکھیں تو وہ زیادہ نیچے گہرائی تک جو ہے جا رہا ہے، جو ان کے عمق اور زیادہ گہرائی تک جو ہے بتاتا ہے کہ زیادہ جو ہے پختگی ان کے یہاں رشتے میں آ چکی ہے۔ اس پینٹنگ کے پیچھے بڑی شاندار بیک گراؤنڈ بنایا گیا ہے جو ہمیں شادی کی فضا یاد دلاتا ہے۔ یہاں پر ڈاکٹر صاحب بتا رہے ہیں کہ یہاں اتنا واضح نہیں آ رہا اس جو کمپیوٹر کی بنا پر، لیکن جو اصل تصویر ہے اس کے اندر جو ہے یہ رنگ جو ہے بہت زیادہ نمایاں جو ہے وہ نظر آتے ہیں جو پیچھے بنے ہوئے ہیں، جو کہ شادی کے بارے میں جو ہے وہ اس کی عکاسی کرتے ہیں۔
میرے پاس اپنا ہے۔
ما عفا رجل، یہ عبارت کچھ یوں ہے، ما عفا رجل عن مظلمۃ الا زادہ اللہ بها عزا، کہ جو بھی شخص اپنے اوپر ہونے والے ظلم کو معاف کر دیتا ہے تو اللہ اس کی عزت میں اضافہ فرماتا ہے۔ یہ مطلب دو جملوں سے مل کر بنا ہے، اگر آپ اسے دیکھیں تو پہلا حصہ ہے ما عفا رجل عن مظلمۃ، یعنی نہیں معاف کرتا کوئی شخص اپنے اوپر ہونے والے کسی ظلم کو، اور دوسرا حصہ ہے الا زادہ اللہ بها عزا، مگر یہ کہ اللہ اس کو مزید عزت عطا کرتا ہے۔ چونکہ آخری جملہ پہلے جملے پر مبنی ہے، یعنی پہلا جملہ ہے ظلم کو، اپنے اوپر ہونے والے ظلم کو معاف کرنا، اور اس کا نتیجہ کیا نکلتا ہے آپ کی عزت کے اندر جو ہے مزید اضافہ ہونا۔ تو اس بنا پر پینٹنگ میں پہلے جملے کو نیچے لکھا گیا ہے جبکہ دوسرے جملے کو اوپر لکھا گیا ہے، کیونکہ دوسرا جملہ جو ہے وہ نتیجہ ہوتا ہے پہلے جملے کا۔ مزید برآں خوش نویس حضرات کی یہ بھی خواہش ہوتی ہے کہ اللہ کا نام جو ہے پینٹنگ میں جتنا زیادہ سے زیادہ ممکن ہو سکے اسے بلند لکھا جائے۔ پہلے جملے کے الفاظ کی بناوٹ نسبتاً آسان اور پڑھنے میں مشکل نہیں ہے، آپ آسانی سے انہیں پڑھ سکتے ہیں۔ یہ اظہار ہے صفائی نفس کا جو معاف کر، جبکہ دوسرا جملہ یعنی صفائی نفس کا کہ جو معاف کر دیتا ہے، جبکہ دوسرا جملہ مشکل انداز میں ڈیزائن کیا گیا ہے کہ جس میں شان و شوکت ہے اور یہ مناسبت رکھتا ہے ایسے عزت دار شخص سے کہ جو بلندی اور عزت کو حاصل کر چکا ہے لوگوں کو معاف کر کے۔ اور چونکہ یہ تصور، معاف کرنے کا تصور اور اللہ جو انسان کو عزت عطا کرتا ہے، یہ تصور خالصتاً اسلامی اور دینی تصور ہے، اس لیے اس عبارت کو یوں ڈیزائن کیا گیا ہے کہ جو دینی عبارت جیسے مساجدوں سے مشابہ مساجد جو ہیں اس کی طرح انہیں اسے ڈیزائن کیا گیا ہے۔ اس کے ساتھ ساتھ اللہ نے ہمیں اس بات کی بھی توفیق دی ہے کہ ہم نے اس ڈیزائن میں جمالیاتی عنصر کو بھی نمایاں کرنے کی کوشش کی ہے۔ دیکھنے والے کے لیے اس میں کشش اور خوبصورتی کا عنصر موجود ہے، وہ اس طرح کہ ہم نے جو عبارت نیچے لکھی ہے اگر آپ ہم اس عبارت میں نیچے دیکھیں تو اس میں ہمیں جو ہے وہ 3 پیالے بنے ہوئے نظر آ رہے ہیں۔ آپ دیکھیے اس میں 2 عین کے ہیں اور ایک ایک شروع میں عین کا پیالہ بنا ہوا، ایک آخر میں عین کا پیالہ بنا ہوا، اور ایک درمیان میں جیم کا پیالہ بنا ہوا آپ کو نظر آ رہا ہے۔ اس کے ساتھ ساتھ باقی تمام حروف کو برابر برابر ہم نے جگہ تقسیم کی گئی ہے۔ اسی طرح دیکھیں کہ عبارت میں جو اوپر عبارت لکھی ہوئی ہے اس میں عین کا ایک پیالہ بنایا گیا ہے۔ اسی طرح دیکھیں کہ ہم نے دونوں سائڈوں پر مختلف چھوٹی چھوٹی سی عبارت، ایک طرف عن ابی ہریرہ لکھا ہے، اور یہ اس لیے ہے تاکہ حروف کے سائز میں جو فرق ہے اس میں خوبصورت مناسبت قائم ہو جائے۔ یہ عبارت ہے، اصل عبارت کچھ یوں ہے، من اطاع غضبہ اضاع ادبہ، کہ جس نے اپنے غصے کی بات مان لی اس نے اپنے ادب کو ضائع کیا۔ اس عبارت کو ایسے متحرک جسم کے طور پر بنایا گیا ہے کہ جو درمیان سے زیادہ اور اوپر نیچے سے نسبتاً کم چوڑا ہے، اور جس کو قرار نہیں ہے، کیونکہ جو شخص اپنے غصے کی پیروی کرتا ہے اپنا توازن کھو بیٹھتا ہے اور اسے قرار حاصل نہیں ہوتا، کیونکہ غصہ کرنے والے کی شخصیت پر غصہ غالب آ جاتا ہے۔ اس بات کی طرف اشارہ کرنے کے لیے ہم نے لفظ غضب کو پینٹنگ میں سب سے زیادہ جگہ دی ہے۔ اس کے برعکس لفظ ادب جو ہے اسے ہم نے چھوٹے سائز میں پینٹنگ میں بالکل نیچے لکھا ہے، کیونکہ اس کا مفہوم یہ بنتا ہے کہ اس نے غصہ کیا، اس نے ادب کو ضائع کر دیا۔ اس کتابی شکل کو اور اس کے بلاک کو مضبوطی اور خوبصورتی کے لیے ہم نے اس کے پیچھے ایک پھولوں کا ایک جال سا بنایا ہے، جو خط کی اس قسم جو کہ التعلیق الجلی نستعلیق جلی اور فارسی کے روایتی اسلوب کے ساتھ میچ کرتا ہے، اس طرح سے کہ ان پھولوں کا رنگ سنہری ہے لیکن یہ بہت زیادہ چمکدار، نمایاں اور زینت والے نہیں ہیں، اس لیے کہ اس کا جو معنی بنتا ہے وہ نسبتاً جو ہے وہ منفی ہے، اس کا سلبیت کی طرف جو ہے وہ لے کے جا رہا ہے۔ جہاں تک اس شکل میں موجود فنی مفردات کا تعلق ہے تو ہم دیکھتے ہیں کہ ہم 3 حرفوں کو کھینچ کر جو ہے وہ لکھا گیا ہے، اور 3 پیالوں کو ایک دوسرے کے بعد آنے کی لکھا گیا ہے، جن میں ایک اس میں بھی 3 پیالوں کی صورت اس کو جو اس کے اندر دی گئی ہے، جس میں 2 عین کے پیالے اور ایک جو ہے اس میں نون کا پیالہ ہے، اور اس طرح سے اس کو یہ جو پینٹنگ ہے اس کو خوبصورت بنانے کی سعی کی گئی ہے۔ ڈاکٹر صاحب کہتے ہیں کہ ہمارے پاس ابھی 2 منٹ ابھی میرے ٹائم میں سے باقی ہیں، تو میں آپ کو چاہتا ہوں کہ کچھ اور بھی جو ہے اس کے ساتھ ہی دکھاؤں اپنی پینٹنگز میں سے۔ کیا آپ لوگ اس بات کی اجازت دیتے ہیں کہ ڈاکٹر صاحب؟ ڈاکٹر صاحب یہ جو لکھا ہوا ہے یہ مکمل طور پر جو فن خطاطی کے جو قوانین ہیں، قواعد ہیں، اس کے مطابق نہیں ہے۔ ڈاکٹر صاحب نے اس میں کچھ بہرحال خط کے اندر اپنی طرف سے تصرف کیا۔ یہ عباسی دور کے ایک شاعر علی بن الجہم ہیں، ان کی شاعری کا نمونہ ہے۔ یہ اصل میں ایک دیہات کے رہنے والے تھے، دیہات سے جب شہر میں منتقل ہوئے تو بادشاہ کے پاس گئے اور بادشاہ کی تعریف کی، کیونکہ ساری جو ہے ان کی پروان جو تھی وہ دیہات کے ماحول میں جو ہے وہ پروان چڑھ رہے تھے. اس بنا پر بادشاہ کی جب آ کے انہوں نے تعریف کی تو انہوں نے تعریف کچھ اس قسم کے الفاظ سے کی کہ انت کالکلب فی الوفا، کہ اے بادشاہ سلامت آپ تو اس طرح جو ہے وہ وفا کے نہیں ہیں کہ جیسے کتا ہوتا ہے. تو جب یہ لفظ کہے تو سب لوگ جو ہیں وہ اس بات سے جو ہے وہ غصے میں آ رہے کہ دیکھیں یہ آدمی جو ہے وہ بادشاہ کو کیا کہہ رہا ہے، بادشاہ کس طرح سے تعریف کر رہا ہے، بادشاہ کے بارے میں برے کلمات استعمال کر رہا ہے. لیکن بادشاہ سمجھ گیا کہ چونکہ اس کی پروان ہی جو ہے اس ماحول میں چڑھی ہے تو اس بنا پر جو ہے اسے کچھ سمجھ نہیں ہے. اس سے بادشاہ نے کہا کہ اسے جو ہے وہ کچھ نہ کہو، اسے کچھ عرصے تک جو ہے یہیں پہ رہنے دو. چنانچہ اسے بادشاہ کے حکم پر شہر میں بغداد میں باقاعدہ طور پر گھر دے دیا گیا. وہاں پر وہ کچھ عرصہ رہا. پھر اس کے بنا پر شہر میں رہنے کی بنا پر اس کے جو ہے وہ الفاظ، اس کے خیالات بدلے. تو پھر اس نے یہ اشعار کہے. تو پہلے کیا بادشاہ وہ کہہ رہا تھا، اور اب دیکھیے بادشاہ کو جب تعریف کر رہا ہے تو وہ اسے کتے سے تشبیہ جو ہے وہ دے رہا ہے. اور اب دیکھیے کہ اب جو ہے وہ غزل کے اشعار ہیں جو ڈاکٹر صاحب نے لکھے ہوئے ہیں، یہ دیکھیے گا.
عيون المها بين الرصافة والجسر جلبنا الهوى من حيث أدري ولا أدري أعدن لي الشوق القديم ولم أكن سلوت ولكن زدن جمرا على جمر.
تو یہ رصافہ اور جسر جو ہیں یہ جو لفظ ہیں یہ دونوں کے دونوں جو ہیں وہ جگہ ہیں بغداد میں. ان کے بارے میں یہ کہتے ہیں کہ عیون المہا بین الرصافۃ والجسر، کہ خاتون کو انہوں نے تشبیہ دی ہے شاعر نے، ایک اس کی آنکھوں کو نیل گائے کی آنکھوں سے جو ہے وہ تشبیہ دے رہے ہیں اور کہتے ہیں کہ یہ کچھ آنکھیں ہیں کہ جو ان مقامات پہ ہیں کہ جلبنا الہوا من حیث ادری ولا ادری، وہ مجھے عشق پر جو ہے وہاں سے مجھے کھینچ رہی ہیں کہ جہاں سے مجھے بعض جگہوں کا پتہ ہے اور بعض جگہوں کا مجھے پتہ ہی نہیں ہے جہاں سے مجھے جو ہے وہ کھینچ رہی ہیں. اعدن لی الشوق القدیم ولم اکن سلوت نسیت، اعد لی الشوق القدیم ولم اکن سلوت، وہ مجھے جو ہے میرے شوق کو دوبارہ سے زندہ کر رہی ہے، میرے اندر جو آگ ہے اس کو دوبارہ سے زندہ کر رہی ہیں. میں اسے ختم نہیں ہوا تھا، ولیکن زدنا جمرا علی جمری، لیکن یہ ہے کہ یہ اپنی یہ آنکھیں جو ہیں جو میرے اندر جو پہلے سے عشق کا سوتا موجود تھا لیکن ٹھنڈا پڑ چکا تھا اسے مزید بڑھکا رہی ہیں. تو آپ دیکھتے ہیں ڈاکٹر صاحب نے اس نے یہ کیا ہے کہ آپ دیکھیں گے کیوں عیون المہا، عیون کا معنی جو ہے وہ آنکھیں ہوتا ہے. تو ڈاکٹر صاحب نے باقاعدہ طور پر جو ہے اس میں دیکھیے کہ آنکھ کی جو ہے وہ باقاعدہ طور پر تجریدی طور پر جو ہے وہ ڈاکٹر صاحب نے جو ہے وہ آنکھ کی شکل جو ہے وہاں پر جو ہے بنائی ہے. تو یہ رصافہ اور جسر بیسیکلی دو جگہیں ایسی ہیں کہ جو نہر کے دو کنارے ہیں، دریا کے دو کنارے ہیں. تو وہ جو اس نے کہا تھا رصافہ اور جسر کے درمیان، تو اگر ہم دیکھیں اس کو تو اس میں اوپر سے نیچے کا بھی دیکھیں تو ڈاکٹر صاحب نے جو لائنیں کھینچی ہوئی ہیں اس کے بنا پر اوپر کی لائن اور دوسری لائن کے اندر یوں لگتا ہے کہ جیسے پانی چل رہا ہے اس کے درمیان جو ہے اسی طرح سے فاصلہ ہے جس طرح سے کہ دریا کے دونوں کناروں کے درمیان ہوتا ہے. ڈاکٹر صاحب آپ لوگوں کا بہت شکریہ ادا کر رہے ہیں اور کہہ رہے ہیں کہ جی اب وقت ختم ہو چکا ہے، میں آپ سے اجازت چاہتا ہوں. آپ لوگوں کے سننے کا بہت زیادہ آپ نے سنا ہے میری باتوں کو، آپ کا بہت شکریہ.
Thank you so much, Dr. Salahuddin Shahzad and Dr. Abdul Qadir Khan. Moving on with the session, now I would like to call our last speaker of the session, Miss Emma Clar. She is an expert garden designer specializing in Islamic gardens since 2001. She has a degree in history and history of art from University College London and received her master's degree on symbolism of the Islamic garden from the Royal College of Art. She finds that the knowledge and visual memory of Islamic and Eastern textiles is useful and inspiring when designing gardens, as well as when lecturing and writing on Islamic art and architecture. I would like to thank her for traveling across the globe and attend this prestigious meeting and event. We would now like her to come on stage and throw light on her paper under the title Calligraphy and the Islamic Garden, with special reference to the Taj Mahal and the Alhambra. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Ms. Emma Clark.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Just one moment while I get the slides up. That's wonderful, thank you. Just the first one. Thank you. And just first of all, I'd like to thank Dr. Masood, the principal, and Dr. Siddiqui in particular for inviting me. Very kind of them to arrange everything. And had such a warm welcome from 5 o'clock in the morning, receiving a bunch of flowers, which I've never had in my life, and I probably will never have again, so I'm very happy. And the beautiful girls, the students who greet us every morning, lining the red carpet. Lovely to see them. And I feel in England, unfortunately, in order to be equal to men, we start dressing like them and we wear rather dreary clothes. But here, you all look beautiful, and long may it last, because dressing like men doesn't mean we get the power like them. So to begin, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. The great scholar, Professor Sayyid Hussain Nasr, has written, "The noble Quran first descended vertically from the world of divine command into the heart of the Prophet, or from the formless into in the metaphysical sense, through a series of descents into the world of form," which Kamal Sahib in fact touched upon yesterday. And we of course live in this world of form. So how do we capture a glimmer down here, as it were, of the heavenly world, of the formless or beyond form? Well, there's no doubt that majestic and rhythmical calligraphy in all its many manifestations, depicting verses of the Quran, is one of the most powerful means. Calligraphy, as has been said many times in the past couple of days, is well known to be the highest of the visual arts of Islam, and as such is a sacred art par excellence. And all true sacred art is essentially the presence of the celestial realm within this lower realm of form. It is the divine beauty captured by craftsmen over generations through not only technical skill passed down from master to apprentice, but also through discipline, dedication, patience, reverence, inspiration, and above all, love, as many of you know who practiced a traditional art or craft. As one writer has put it, sacred art is heaven descended to earth rather than earth reaching towards heaven. And of course there's no doubt that the Taj Mahal is one of the greatest manifestations of this. And clearly it would not have the impact it does if first of all it were not placed at the head of a beautiful garden, as well as on the banks of the river, and second, if it had no calligraphy, my two main subjects this morning. In fact, it was my good friend, Mr. Taimur Khan, Kamil Sahib's son, who suggested these subjects for me to speak about here at the conference. There are 3 locations at the Taj where there is calligraphy. The great entrance gateway, the Taj itself and the mosque. Indeed, the Taj Mahal, as one writer has said, displays the largest inscriptional program in the Islamic world. It has 25 Quranic inscriptions, of which 14 are complete surahs. And apart from the entrance gateway, which is red sandstone, as you see, the other inscriptions are black letters inlaid into the white marble in Thuluth script. This is on the mausoleum itself. However, the main inscription is in fact on the Taj gateway that we're looking at here, in which there is the whole of the Surah Fajr, the dawn, chapter 89, which ends, O soul at peace, return unto thy Lord, well-pleased and well-pleasing. Enter thou among my servants, enter thou my paradise. So one could say that here we have the key to the whole symbolism, not only of the gardens of the Taj Mahal, but also the gardens of all Mughal mausoleums. Indeed, the main theme of all the Taj Mahal inscriptions is an eschatological one, all of the surahs or part surahs referring to the Day of Judgment, Divine Mercy and the Gardens of Paradise. Interestingly, we actually know who the calligrapher was, Abdul Haq from Shiraz, who was given the title Amanat Khan, Lord of Trust, by Shah Jahan. In fact, he was the only craftsman working on the Taj Mahal who was allowed to reveal his identity. Such was the elevated position that he held. And no doubt that this was in large part due to the fact that he was transcribing the divine word. He was also the calligrapher at Sikandra on Akbar's tomb, which is where this slide is from. Although altogether there are around 130 mentions of the Gardens of Paradise in the Quran, and here on the Taj Mahal mausoleum itself there is the entire Surah 98, Al-Bayina, the clear evidence, the last two verses of which say, those who believe and do deeds of righteousness, it's better to be closer, do deeds of righteousness, their reward is with their Lord, gardens of Eden, underneath which rivers flow, wherein they will dwell forever. And in the central tomb chamber, the second half of Surah 76, Al-Insan, is inscribed, in which the gardens of paradise are depicted in delightful terms of abundant shade, clusters of fruit, vessels of silver and goblets of crystal, and a fountain named Salsabil. Thus, when we enter via the great arched gate into the whole Taj Mahal complex, and if we are fortunate enough to be aware of the meaning of at least some of the calligraphy, it deepens our understanding and love of the beauty that unfolds before us, increasing perhaps our desire to enter paradise, and there's no doubt that all of us would like to go there when we depart this realm. Now, the longest descriptions of the Gardens of Paradise, Jannat al-Firdaus, in the Quran are to be found in Surah Al-Rahman, as I'm sure many or most of you know here, in which 4 gardens divided into 2 pairs are elaborated on. Now, all true Islamic gardens of Chahar design, Chahar, of course, again, you all know, means 4 gardens. They're inspired to a greater or lesser extent by these descriptions, and the Taj Mahal is no exception. It lies at the head of a vast green and verdant Chahar Bagh, the raised central pool with a fountain representing one of the fountains in paradise, and the 4 main quarters of the garden created by the channels of water representing the 4 rivers of paradise, mentioned in Surah 47. And this, of course, echoes the book of Genesis in the Bible, in which it is written, and a river went out of Eden to water the garden, and from thence it was parted into 4 heads. And interestingly, the Gardens of Paradise are also called Gardens of Eden, which I quoted before in the Quran. And there's also a hadith, of course, in which the Prophet describes his ascent to heaven and speaks of 4 rivers, one of water, one of honey, one of milk, and one of wine. So we could say that the Quranic inscriptions provide the inner dimension of the garden, as it were, the haqiqah, or the spiritual truth, which of course penetrates all traditional Islamic art, and indeed the whole of the Islamic civilization. And this is what is meant by divine unity, at-tawheed, which Dr. Shal-Kazmi spoke about so well yesterday, the central message of the Quran. In such a civilization, there is no separation between the sacred and the profane, and daily life is a constant interaction between the human and the divine. Art created in such a society has a function, particularly one could say the art of calligraphy. It is never simply aesthetically pleasing or a purely subjective experiment, but is essentially a kind of prayer. A visual finite form offering a window onto the mysterious, invisible, infinite. But what of the garden's visible features? The outward dimension. I'd like to sum these up as briefly as possible, since I'm often asked in England, what is an Islamic garden, and in what way is it different from other gardens? Well, the first supremely important element, of course, is water. And this is closely followed by shade. These two deriving from the desert garden, the oasis. And third is the geometric 4-fold plan, which we have referred to. This is a universal form representing the 4 cardinal directions and all things earthly. It was also the optimum method of irrigation in ancient Persia, as well as many other civilizations across the world. Fourth, and we could say most importantly for our subject here, we have the harmonious interweaving of architecture with the garden. Whether it be a pavilion, as here in the Generalife in Spain, or a palace, or a mausoleum, of course, the Taj Mahal, which we've just seen, the close link between the two is a distinctive feature of the Islamic garden. Here in Lahore, as you all know from your beautiful Shalimar Gardens, there are many pavilions providing places to sit and have shade and a breeze. And the 5th element is the idea that the Paradise Garden is an enclosed space, separated from the outside world by walls or trees in order to create a verdant sanctuary of flowing water and cool shade within. Indeed, the word paradise actually means enclosed by walls, from the Persian paradesa. It's also in keeping with the idea that paradise is a secret and hidden place, and we have to work, as it were, to find it. It is something mysterious and hidden. And finally, the 6th element. This is the importance of order, balance, and correct proportion between all of the above. This is a vital factor in determining the resulting harmony and beauty of the Islamic garden. Again, we relate this back to the entrance calligraphy. Enter thou my paradise. The Taj garden would not be a paradise garden without the above the factors I've just alluded to. And there's no doubt that the garden of the Taj not only symbolizes the paradise garden that Shah Jahan envisaged for his beloved wife, Mumtaz Mahal, but that it also plays a vital role in the terrestrial beauty of the mausoleum itself. So that here on earth, the visitor may taste something of the joys of heaven, and he or she may temporarily enter paradise, both physically and, if aware and receptive to the underlying symbolism, may also be blessed with experiencing something of the metaphysical heavenly realities. It's also important to remember that the Islamic Paradise Garden is essentially one of contemplation. This could be said to be the final element. The word peace, salam, is the only word spoken there. And I would argue that it is this special quality which permeates all true Islamic gardens and gives them their particular quiet and serene ambience. The verse I mentioned first on the gateway refers to the soul of peace. The soul at peace. True peace comes from within, as we know. And Jalaluddin Rumi wrote that the real gardens and flowers are within. They are in man's heart, not outside. However, sitting in a beautiful garden founded upon spiritual principles lends balm to the soul and helps us to open our hearts so that we too may receive, albeit temporarily, a taste of the inward divine peace. Now, just briefly, by way of contrast, we'll look at the Alhambra and the Generalife, the exquisite series of palaces in Granada, Spain, and the garden which we're viewing now from the Alhambra across to the Generalife, to one of the oldest of the pavilions, the Patio de la Sequia. Each one of the enclosed gardens is a kind of paradise in miniature. Unlike the vast Taj Mahal garden with its wide open aspect, these gardens are inward looking towards the heart and upward looking towards heaven, perfect examples of the enclosed hidden garden. The walls of the palaces are famously covered with the calligraphic inscription, وَلَا غَالِبَ إِلَّا اللَّهِ, there is no conqueror but God. And one could say that this phrase everywhere, along with the many other inscriptions, such as Baraka Kamila, perfect blessing, or Alhamdulillah ala ni'mat al-Islam, praise be to God for the bounty of Islam, and al-Izza lillah. These are just examples of calligraphy. They don't necessarily correspond to what I'm saying, because there are so many. It's amazing how the walls are covered with so many different calligraphic inscriptions in different ways. One could say that all of these are constant reminders of our utter dependence upon the will of heaven, even for the Sultan and his family. Besides the pious words, this is on the wall of the garden of the Court of Myrtles. There are also inscriptions from the contemporary poet Ibn Zamrak, often referring to gardens and paradise. In fact, in the Court of Myrtles, there used to be two poems by Ibn Zamrak, speaking of an eternal paradise of everlasting fortune and happiness, in which to bring joy, all kinds of refreshing shade and cool water are joined together. Now there's less shade in the court of Myrtles, but the water continues to flow, alhamdulillah. The next courtyard is the Court of Lions, which in fact was known in Nasrid times, which is around the 14th century. The whole of the Alhambra was really constructed mainly the 13th to 14th century. It was known as Al-Riyad al-Said, the Garden of Happiness. And we have to try and imagine here that the four quarters were actually planted much more profusely. Now we just have the four citrus trees because of the difficulties of watering and the damage it does to the fabric of the building. But there used to be a far more balanced composition between the ordered space, the arches, the planting and the water. A perfect balance, one could say, in fact, of the three elements of Islamic art: calligraphy, geometry and arabesque, or Islami. And this is the central fountain, and around the rim of the fountain is inscribed another poem by Ibn Zamrak in praise of the Sultan and in praise of gardens and water. He describes the water overflowing as a lover's tears. So, by way of conclusion, it is true to say that the calligraphy on monuments such as the Taj Mahal and the Alhambra is often too high or too far away to be read, even for one familiar with calligraphic inscriptions. However, the integration of the Word of God on architecture is an intrinsic aspect of Islamic art, and even if it is not understood, its very existence serves as a reminder that, as I said at the beginning, the celestial realm has descended into this realm of forms, and thus bestows, as it were, a sanctifying and deeply contemplative ambience upon everything in its proximity. And if a garden is integral to the architecture concerned, as it is with the Taj Mahal and the Alhambra, then it too participates in this sanctification. But thinking about this in the last few weeks, really the beauty of a garden, if created upon principles fundamental to the Quran, it really speaks for itself and does not depend upon the calligraphy for its spirituality and its contemplativity. One could say that the calligraphy, in a sense, reinforces and highlights what a garden encapsulates in a more outward and sensual manner. But what is fundamental is its relationship to the essence of the Quran. The relationship between calligraphy and the garden in Islam, I would say, is not a fundamental one, but what is fundamental is the garden's relationship to the meaning, to the essence of the Quran. I think this is the important point. But if the architecture to which the garden is attached is carved with holy epigraphic inscriptions, then it can deepen one's understanding and appreciation of the garden. We come back to the divine unity upon which all Islamic art is founded. It penetrates all of life, and all traditional Islamic art is never an amalgamation of individual elements, but is the result of a pre-existing order and harmony. So, when I said the final element in Islamic art was the contemplative effect, this arises from its being constructed upon the principles of the Quran. It is this which gives the Islamic garden its particular serene beauty. To give the last word to Titus Burkhardt, Islamic art, and there's no doubt that the garden is a branch of Islamic art, is essentially the projection into the visual order of certain aspects of divine unity. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Emma Clark. Thanks a lot, our highly regarded speakers, for sharing their delightful thoughts. Now I would like to open the question-answer session. Your participation will be highly appreciated.
I'd like to thank everyone for their wonderful talk this morning. Very insightful, very sensitive, and much appreciated. My question, however, really falls to Emma to discuss how she teaches at an institute that promotes traditional art and architecture in London. And I thought it might be very helpful for everyone to hear a little of how such an institution can survive in the midst of London's very aggressively pro-modern artistic environment. And I wondered if she could just shed some light on that, as well as any other comments you might want to make. Thank you. It's working.
Thank you very much. It's an important question, and we often ask ourselves the same thing. But we're very lucky. We're in a kind of fortress, as it were. We often see ourselves as an oasis. So one of the important points is that there's a group of us, and we support each other, and we call ourselves a family, in fact, because people come both from Britain and all over the world. And I think we give them, I hope, some kind of understanding that wherever you're from and whatever religion you follow, there is a universal basis to all the traditional art that we're looking at. And of course this universal basis leads us back to the spiritual world, which is one, even though we are all diverse. And I think there's a constant dialogue between both the tutors and the students themselves. And I find that students who've been particularly at art school in Britain, but I think it's the case here, is that they're forced with well, in Britain anyway, probably not here, but they have a very forcible secular idea of art. And if you're struggling to find some kind of truth or some kind of meaning to one's existence, and some people really try and do this through art because many people are creative and this is their way of searching, they come to us and they're very relieved. We sit around the table and discuss, and people just feel a huge sense of relief that they can talk about spiritual things, they can actually mention the word God, which I can tell you is very hard most of the time in London and in almost all art schools. So there's a great sense of camaraderie, there's a great sense that we are supporting each other. I think here there are different problems. I know that you teach a lot of Western art here, and we have people who come from Pakistan to London, ironically, to learn about the traditions here and in India and all over the East, in fact, and then who can come back here and see that what we in the West find so moving and beautiful in Islamic art is something that we have lost in the West, but we find that it's more alive still just in the East. So we kind of feed from each other. I mean, the beauty and spirituality of Islamic art is in a sense what we're looking for in the West, because this kind of art is rarely practiced. There are, of course, people who follow a Christian tradition and paint icons, and we teach icon painting. So we teach art from as far as possible, all the great sacred traditions, but we do specialize in Islamic art because it is still alive, just as Kamal Sahib will confirm, but only just. And from here to, say, Morocco and Istanbul, there are many craftsmen still practicing, and we go on field trips every year in order to see things actually being practiced in situ, in life, because as I was saying, and as others have said before me, there is no separation. If you practice a traditional art, it's part of your daily life. And of course that's not true in the West. Art is not a part of life at all, really. It's as Reza Shah Kazmi was saying yesterday, it's a luxury. And it doesn't give one any meaning, mostly, most Western art. So I'm not sure if that's helpful. You can, there are many other things to be said probably, but that's, thank you.
Two questions. One is to the professor from Iraq and the other one is to Emma, to professor from Iraq. The question is that you showed us a flower based on La Tawfiq Billah. It has got 5 petals or 5 limbs. I would like to know why it has 5, whereas in Islam 6 is more important because God created world in 6 days. 7 is important because there are 7 heavens. And 8 is important because of Hast-o-Neest. So I would like to know why it has 5 limbs. And Emma, you very rightly said that in Islamic architecture, water plays a very important role. Yes. Water plays a very important role. Yes. Does the falling water and the sound of water has also a role to play in Islamic architecture? Because when the water falls, the sound of the waterfall is another element which is very important in Islamic architecture. I would like you to comment on that also. Thank you very much.
डॉक्टर साहब ने पहली बात यह की है कि मेरा इस तरफ जो है मैंने इस हवाले से कोई भी ज़हन में रखा कि ये 5, 6, 6, 7, 8 जो हैं ये ख़ास तौर पर जो है मुख्तलिफ रम्ज़ हैं, इस हवाले से मैंने इस चीज़ को ज़हन में नहीं रखा। एक बात तो ये, दूसरी बात ये है कि इसका ताल्लुक डॉक्टर साहब कहना है कि 5 ये मैंने 4 जो हैं वो मुझे पहले जो है वो कुछ बेहतर नहीं लगे थे, इसकी वजह से मैंने 5 का सिलसिला किया। 6, 7 वो ठीक है, उसका ताल्लुक जो है वो आखिरत के साथ है जो आप फरमा रहे हैं, और आसमान के साथ है। मैं इस दुनिया के साथ 5 रखता हूँ क्योंकि 6, 7, 8 में है वो आखिरत के साथ इख्तिलाल है।
بعدين الأربعة والستة والأربعة فيها دلالات محدودة، فأنا أردت أخرج إلى العام. يعني مثلا 6 في دلالة معينة للنجمة السداسية، الأربعة معروف يعني أيضا دلالات عامة، فأنا أردت أن أخرج إلى شكل محايد.
और दूसरा ये कि डॉक्टर साहब ये कह रहे हैं कि जैसे आपने भी बताया है कि 4 है, 6 है, 7 है, 8 है, इनके बकायदा तौर पर ख़ास मकबूलात हैं, उनसे मुराद होती है कि ये चीज़ मुराद है, इसलिए मैंने उनसे निकल के वो लफ्ज़ लिया है कि जिससे आमतौर पर कोई चीज़ मुराद नहीं है वो मैंने बताया, ताकि किसी खास चीज़ की तरफ जो है वो इशारा ना समझा जाए।
Thank you. In answer to your question about water, yes, I think water in all its forms, not just falling, but also still, also in channels. As you know, here again at the Shalimar Gardens, you have the carved slab of water called a chador, I think. You all know better than me, but this is where you carve the stone with patterns so that when the water falls over it, it makes a kind of shawl. Is this working? And it also reflects the sunlight because of the way it breaks up the water. And these different manifestations of water in the Islamic garden are said to be symbolic of the soul, so that, you know, when you go into a garden and you hear the sound of water, generally speaking, you gravitate towards it, even not necessarily consciously. But you know, when you walk around a garden, there should be a kind of mystery, and particularly in an Islamic garden. You want to find the center, and that center is where there's water. There's a fountain, and it's running, or it may be still as well. So you have this, I mean, it's beautiful. I don't think there is any other gardening tradition which uses water in so many different ways. And in fact, a Saudi Arabian friend was telling me that the Bedouins have many, many words for the water when it just goes in a trickle around a corner, it has a special word, and when it goes in a different direction, it has a special word. You know, like the Inuit and the snow, or the reindeers in Lapland. You have many different terms. And this is not because it's so plentiful, but because it's so rare. So I think there's no doubt that it's very profound, our attraction to water. And we're all made of 75% water. So I think your soul is attracted towards it. Oh, sorry. Well, I can get carried away.
Let me elaborate further. There is a fort built by Jahangir in Sheikhupura, and there is his sleeping chambers in that fort. And he wanted that when the rain falls, the rainwater should pass through his sleeping chamber, so that he can really enjoy the rain and touch the water. So you can still that room, the water channel passes through that his sleeping room. So that means the sound was playing a very important role, that the sound of the water. And as far as you refer to the chadar is never flat. It has got the broken surfaces so that water can jump on it and create a sound. And that has, I think, a technical purpose also. When the water jumps, it breaks into small particles. Then it evaporates. And when it evaporates, it creates coolness. So there is quite a scientific thing behind it.
It helps. I think the sound helps when if you're sitting in the garden. The sound of the water can help drown out your soul. Drown out the preoccupations of the world. I think there's a sort of a positive effect in helping you calm oneself as well. It's also called symbolic of mercy. I mean, there's an equation between water and mercy, isn't there, in the Quran? Again, not specifically the sound. I keep going off your subject, but I mean, it's always beautiful to hear the sound of water.
Considering the time, can we have just one last question?
I think that we need to dwell just a little bit more on the plantings that you find at the Alhambra, also at the Taj Mahal, because as I understand it, and modern excavations have shown to be the fact, these gardens were recessed. They were, at the Alhambra, they were as much as 4 feet below the walkways, and to keep the numerous tourists from falling into this pit, they've filled it in today. But the effect was very different. There was nothing standing above this edge. You were actually looking at the top of flowers, and would have given a carpet-like effect, much more so than a series of bushes or hedgerows coming up next to the walkways. Would you like to talk about that a little more?
Is this where? Yes, I know that the time is short, and that's a whole subject really in itself. I didn't touch on the planting, but you're absolutely right. There are a lot of references to sunken gardens, and this idea of walking amongst the clouds as if you were on a carpet. No, it's very important. It's not many of them survive, but there is one in Seville. If you've been to the Alcazar in Seville, there's still a sunken garden there. It's sunk about, must be about 1.5 meters, which is quite all 4 quarters, and they have kept it. So it's good to see that. But no, that was definitely one of the important factors. Not all Islamic gardens, but that's certainly.
Babar's laying out of gardens in Afghanistan, where he was actually making the stream straight to have his waterways in a geometric pattern. I think with the passage of time and the Romantic influence, that a lot of the Alhambra and whatever has become a romantic site and lost a lot of its Islamic character. Would you agree?
But not entirely, actually. I think it's what's remarkable about the Alhambra, even though it's now been under Christian rule for maybe 700 years, it's still been slightly longer under Islamic rule. And in spite of the fact the planting is not very high quality, I think they sort of cater so much for having tourists, 6,000 a day apparently. It's the most visited site in Europe. And they just keep it clean, and they spray it a lot, and I think their planting could be a lot better. But so what was sorry, I can't remember what you were. Oh yes, no, I think that definitely. I have to say, I think the ambiance is still quite. I mean, it's a very profoundly contemplative place. Maybe, and I would attribute that to being laid, very much with the Quran in mind.
Well, my point is there's quite a bit of difference between what we see today in Islamic gardens that you talked about and what they looked like 400 and 500 years ago.
It's true, but that's the nature of gardens. But I would still say that there's a lot of the principles, the geometry is still there, but the planting is very different. And I'm being told off by my chairman, so we can talk about it. Thank you very much.
Very sorry to interrupt this wonderful dialogue that's going on, but I think, yes, do continue these kinds of discussions, but for now we have to stick with the format of the conference and the time constraints. So I'd like to bring this particular session to a close with thanks for these three wonderful presentations. Dr. Muhammad Shoaib, who I thought gave us a very clear presentation connecting the art of calligraphy with the whole spiritual quest and methods and practices, which is true of all of the traditional arts. And he illustrated this very succinctly with very precise and particular illustrations, references to calligraphy. The connection between literature, tasawwuf, and calligraphy. Dr. Salahuddin Sherzad showed us some wonderful examples of traditional calligraphy and ended his presentation with some of his own work, in which he showed how it is possible to innovate and bring a traditional art into conform with the requirements of the modern world, modern art. As he said himself, to do this, he has purposely violated all of the traditional rules in one example. And finally, Dr. Emma Clark brought us back to the basic purposes, intentions, the functioning of traditional arts, and particularly the place of calligraphy. In fact, what she referred to is the integration of all of the arts, in particular architecture, landscape, and the role of calligraphy in this unified experience of Islamic art and architecture and landscape, ending with, of course, that all of this brings us back to the very goal of all of these pursuits, which is to the divine unity. And thank you very much, our three speakers this morning, and if there are any other announcements.
Thank you, Mr. Kamil Khan Mumtaz, and everybody else for their precious time. I would request you all now to please move on to the refreshment area.